taking anything away from the champion tonight.
We're gonna have a fight on our hands tonight.
But it's just always been so sleek, and it hasn't had the definition by design, right? I mean, it's not that he couldn't or didn't want to. It's just to make the weight that he needed to. He couldn't carry that much bulk. And listen, muscle isn't everything. Obviously, you've still got to fight the fight and be able to take some shots on the chin, and be able to kind of conduct your fighting,
Andy Ruiz.
your fighting style at your comfort level. But obviously, the talk, and we're gonna hear it brought up on this show, and it's gonna be brought up on the Talking Head shows around the nation, talking about this fight tonight. There is that light at the end of the tunnel after this fight, and it is Canelo Alvarez. It is at 168. Brian McIntyre, Terrence Crawford's head trainer, was talking a few days ago and was bringing up the fact that we can't look ahead because nothing is guaranteed in boxing. Because how many years did we make it talking about, okay, well, next has to be Errol Spence. Next has to be Errol Spence.
And then it was next has to be Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah, and there was always the discussion, could they get the Floyd Mayweather fight to happen? Now, and that was obviously earlier in the discussion. But tonight's fight is for the vacant WBO and the WBA Super Welterweight Championship, and it's an eliminator for the WA Super Welterweight Championship as well, for Sebastian Fandora's championship, which he took from Tim Czizu, who a lot of people thought this fight was going to be against tonight before Fandora pulled the upset a few months ago. And Tim Czizu is actually on the card tonight, so you'll still be able to see him. It's just not against Terrence Crawford. But when we talk about planning and trying and worrying about the fight after the fight, it's so hard to do because nothing is guaranteed in boxing. And listen, Canelo's got another fight now too. Now, even if Canelo loses, which we've seen him do, he does have the 2 losses on his record. I don't think that changes the trajectory for Terrence Crawford, because that's still the money fight. Right now, Terrence Crawford is the face of boxing. When we're talking about the matchup and stylistic point, Canelo Alvarez is the matchup in boxing from a dollar amount standpoint.
Do you worry at all, though, if Crawford does not come out the winner tonight, that it does put some tarnish on him? Because he's been accused of not fighting the best guys. He's been accused of taking some less than stellar opponents in the past. And losing to a guy with relative inexperience, kind of an unknown, would that maybe for the boxing community at large, certainly not for us, but for the boxing community, would it tarnish that at all enough to maybe take him out of the running?
Yeah, Canelo's not fighting Crawford if he has one loss.
Yeah,
he's just not, because it loses the luster. Now, on the other side, you can have Canelo lose and the luster still be there because the fan base and the amount of eyes that he's going to draw to the attention. Now, I mean, there's no way you get that super fight. And I'll tell you this right now, if Crawford loses tonight, there may be discussion about this being the last fight, because there's nothing else left to change. He's only taking big dollar amount fights going forward. Now, if
he gets to pick his spots now,
if Turki Al-Sheikh is willing to continue to pay him at the level like he was still undefeated, we'll probably see him fight again. But it's not about chasing belts. And you brought up the fact that he has been labeled as a guy that doesn't always fight the toughest fights or ducks certain guys or whatever. And I think it's important to point out who was saying those type of things. That was the Derek James, Errol Spence camp that really kind of started that slander about Bud Crawford's name. He unified 3 weight classes. So it's not like the guys he was facing weren't champions in what he was trying to accomplish. It had a lot to do with Bob Arum and Top Rank and how they mishandled the Terrence Crawford situation from the get-go, and never really understood the level of superstar that they could and did have, because he was from Omaha. And I think there's that misconception that, you can't have a big fighter.
He's not from one of the coasts. He's not Hispanic.
He's not from the Dallas big TV market area, so he can't have the popularity in which he had. And I think there's a lot of people lose sight of the fact that when he really hit the fever pitch of being at the top of cards that were of note, it also was in the middle of the pandemic. Like when Terrence Crawford finally started breaking into that top 10, top 8, top 5 pound for pound ranking, there was nobody in attendance at events other than people's families. So, and I think that hurt a little bit too, but that should have driven up pay-per-view numbers. But at the same time, there's a global-wide pandemic going on. People didn't have jobs and things like that. So there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just the fact that, and I think the debate's over. We don't even have to say this anymore. People were ducking Terrence Crawford, not the other way around.
Sure. 2 fights in the last 2 years. Is there any concern about ring rust?
No, I'm not concerned at all, because we saw this, and we're going to talk about it in the next segment with the sparring match with Andre Ward. Like, Bud doesn't ever stop working. It has nothing to do. Like, he's just always in camp. He'll go 3 months in a camp. He'll take his team, him, Coach Red, Bomac, and Ronaldo and those guys will go up to Colorado Springs and do a full camp without knowing who they're fighting against to keep him in prime shape and ready. And he'll work with guys in his camp. Him and Shakur Stevens spar multiple times throughout the year, and obviously you're talking about the best in the world, his weight class too, and that's what keeps Shakur sharp as well. But I'm not worried about ring rust in that situation because they 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 can the Terrence Crawford camp can say all they want that we're not preparing for Canelo, we're not worried about Canelo, we got to get through tonight. They've been preparing for Canelo Alvarez since the end of the Errol Spence fight.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, we had a long breakdown of what we thought was going to happen in the fight yesterday, and just catching up on some highlights from Madrimov. It really solidified my thinking about this fight. In that, I just feel like Bud is so much more technically sound, and he's just a better boxer, right? I think he's more responsible. He's certainly thinks the fight game a lot better, and the footwork for Madrimov looks really really sloppy at times. And if you get out of position against Bud Crawford, you're catching one in the chin.
Yeah,
Like,
they had asked Terrence last night about Majimov's 300 amateur fights versus his 11 professional fights. And if you go back and you watch the Errol Spence fight from a year ago or the Horn fight from a couple years ago, you can see when Bud smells the blood in the water, he has the tendency to kind of get over his skis a little bit. You see him, his shoulders kind of get past his toes and things like that. And then there's almost an automatic correction because it doesn't feel right. With Majimov, there's literally that's his style. Like, he is full go. He's gonna be the attacker. He's gonna set the pace. You don't want to do that against a fighter with the boxing IQ of Terrence Crawford because you're not gonna last very long.
arguably the best counterpuncher in the world.
Yeah, arguably the best counterpuncher of all time. Now, there's the argument for Floyd, and I think that may be the case. But you're talking about a guy who literally hones in on what your weaknesses are. Will willingly lose rounds because he has enough faith in his boxing IQ that he could stop you based on what you're doing from an attack standpoint. Plus, he's probably got the best corner in boxing that can help him do that, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too. But you don't want to. The one thing you can't do against Terrence Crawford is be sloppy. And
Yeah.
that's almost what Madrimov does every single fight because he's willing to risk his power versus technique.
But and even guys who come in and they look very technically sound, like we were talking
Errol
about,
Spence.
like we were talking about yesterday, he puts them in places they don't want to go and
Yeah.
makes their technique falter, and then uses that hole that appears when they get frustrated, when they get out of position, to take advantage and put guys away.
I think when we look back on the end of Terrence Crawford's career, because it's so hard to do it now because he does it every fight, and we've seen him do it since he was 14 years old. It's his ability to switch hands and be as comfortable fighting left hand as he is right hand because he can dissect the way his opponent is fighting from so many different angles, but still be able to hit with power from either one of them, and it doesn't replicate to the other side of the ring because it's so unnatural and it's so uncanny. And you honestly, round by round, can have a breakdown of what you need to do in the next round. And when he comes out and stands at a completely different angle, it's a completely different attack
Yeah.
of what you need to do. So it's such an advantage for him to be as ambidextrous as he is and really be able to change the game in the middle of the fight.
And the book on Madrimov also is that he can struggle from time to time with athletic southpaws.
Mhm.
And so I would expect you're going to see a lot of southpaw early in this fight from Bud Crawford.
Which you traditionally do anyway. Yeah. I agree.
Because that's kind of where Madrimov will start to back up and maybe not know quite what to do. He tends to cover up against the ropes. If Bud can stay on the front foot and push him around a little bit, it might get ugly in a hurry.
Very rarely do we see Terrence Crawford go southpaw, go back to fighting orthodox, and then switch back to southpaw again. We've seen him do it against Amir Khan. That's something I could see him doing tonight. Coming out in a southpaw stance, switching to orthodox, figuring it out, and then getting back to the left-handed power punch to finish the fight is something I think is probably the way we see this fight end tonight. Bud Crawford was in the ring at B&B Boxing in Omaha with Andre Ward, one of the greatest to ever do it in boxing. We're going to break down that video, exactly what it looked like in the 3 rounds that they sparred in the Omaha area, and we're going to tell you exactly where the advantage is of Terrence Crawford's camp. When we come back here on the After Hours Lounge live from Los Angeles, California, we're breaking down Crawford v. Madrimov and a whole lot more when we come back here on 1620 The Zone. 17 on a Saturday afternoon here on 1620 The Zone. Jimmy Allen, Dan Campen, and John Schreiner with you live from Los Angeles, California, right across the street from the Crypto Center. We'll be heading over to BMO Stadium here shortly ahead of Crawford versus Madrimov tonight. We are brought to you by our friends at Bellevue University. Download the BU Bruins app to keep up to date on all things Bellevue athletics. There's been a lot made about Terrence Crawford's age heading into this fight, and he recently sparred with Andre Ward, obviously one of the best to ever do it, and they wanted to go 3 rounds. And when you talk about 2 of the best in the game, I had to look this up because I wasn't sure how old Andre Ward was, but I was like, oh, he's probably in his mid. Andre Ward is only 40 years old.
Yeah, he hung him up early.
He is only 4 years older than Terrence Crawford. Well, actually, 3 months, 1 day, 3 months and 1 day, 3 years and 1 month, 1 day to the age. So it's really only closer to 3 years in age difference between these two. But we were talking in the beginning of the segment. We talked about it last night. After this, moving up to 168, and how difficult would that be for Terrence Crawford? Andre Ward, a little bit slimmer than when he was fighting, but is still in great shape. Andre Ward fought at 175. So and Bud was and again, this is a sparring match, and there's helmet gear on and rib protectors and things like that in discussion here. But you kind of saw the ace in the hold for Team Crawford on camera, and it's Brian McIntyre. In my opinion, he is absolutely the difference maker. Derek James, Errol Spence's head trainer, gave him the credit for that a year ago, and he's really the ace up the sleeve for Bud Crawford. It's one thing to dissect a mid-card or prelims match and just be able to find an attack point that can change a fight for somebody that...
Or just doing it on video when you have time to sit there and study it.
And breaking it down. After the first round of this sparring match, Brian McIntyre pulls Terrence Crawford into the corner and says, watch his feet. When he's doing this, he's going to pivot to his other foot. When he puts his foot at the left angle, you need to come over here. And for the second and third rounds of again, just a sparring match, Bud Crawford controlled the way the ring and the way the attack that Andre Ward was throwing at him from the onslaught to the end of it, and really controlled the whole second and third round of the sparring match. And again, this is a retired boxer, but from a technical standpoint, one of the best to ever do it. Still had some power. He was wearing headgear, but really looked like... And Andre Ward talked about this afterwards. He said it was a great experience to be able to get in there and experience what everybody's been talking about. And just seemed like, okay, that is the phenomenon. It's the real deal. Because it's not about the power punching. It's not about knockouts. It's about the way Terrence Crawford dictates fights and never looks out of place and out of sorts. And it doesn't matter who he has been against from a weight standpoint, from a technical standpoint, or from a power standpoint. He's been able to be the dictator in the fight.
Well, it's like we always talk about in football. When you have the best offensive coordinators, what do? They run a play and they see how the defense reacts, right? And then they say, okay, I know what's going to work against this defense, right? I know what we can run.
Let's run it till they stop it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I know how we can adjust our blocking scheme. I know what routes we can run against these coverages that they're going to run. I can see where their defensive backs are moving in the flow of their defense. These are where the holes are going to be. Having that as a boxer, having someone who can see it from outside the ring, because I think a lot of times in combat sports, you're so close. You don't always see all the things. It's not possible to see all the things. You're not going to pick up on every little nuance. To have that person in your corner who is able to do that and do it so well, that's what makes you one of the best in the world.
And we talked about this last night. It's Bud Crawford's loyalty to his guys and his crew. And that's one of the benefits of having that relationship with Brian McIntyre is he's gotten you through these. He's helped you weather the storm so many times that you have to trust him. He's helped you do it so many times that it's almost impossible not to. And, the one kind of lost loyalty. I don't like the one breakup that we've seen throughout Terrence Crawford's career is with Top Rank Boxing and Bob Arum, and Bud was talking.
Couldn't trust him.
Bud was talking to the Stomping Ground podcast 2 days ago and was asked what the feeling is of working with Turki Al-Sheikh and how he's helped promote this fight. Because listen, we saw that movie trailer style promotional event that they did a couple days ago where Bud and Madrimov are in the ring, and it's like produced as a movie. We've never seen something like that where there's so much production value put into a fight for Terrence Crawford. And we don't see it a lot in boxing in general. It's usually just guys on a poster and their faces sell it, and hey, they're gonna have gloves and hit each other. You should come by this pay-per-view. But it really feels like the promotional material that has been done for this fight has been treated as a bigger deal than I think a lot of people in the boxing world are looking at it as. And if that's the case and they're willing to do this for this fight, and Terrence does win tonight and does get to Canelo, and the promotion's going to be off the charts, especially if this is done by the same group.
So, and I've been thinking about this too. Like, one of the things actually that I think hurt Terrence Crawford in his relationship with Top Rank is that he's not flashy. He's not attention seeking. He's not out there like
doesn't want to be
with 100 gold chains driving a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
Like, he's not that guy. You know, he's not out here like showing off. He's just not that person. So I don't think Top Rank quite knew how to market him. Right? He's not that like larger than life superstar. He's just a dude who happens to be a good boxer.
And you're more likely to find him at a bar throwing darts than in a Lamborghini.
I was going to say, and that's what really bothers me about Top Rank, because every interaction that you see Crawford have, especially in his hometown of Omaha, he's just like a lovable guy who you could like grab a beer with if you wanted to. He is the same guy that was like, hey, we could put you on like a big old float for your victory parade after the Spence fight. We could do all this stuff. And he's like, no. I bought a boat. I want you to pull me on my boat.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
He didn't buy that boat for that. That's his boat. Like, he's had that boat for like 4 years.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
That wasn't just for the parade.
I was like, it's his boat.
I've told this story on air before, but one night I was at Pepper Jack. Shout out to Pepper Jack's down in the old market. And Terrence walked in with my cousin and came up and he put me in a headlock, and I was just standing in line. I didn't know who it was. And I shoved him off of me. And this guy in front of me was like, don't do it. And I was like, I don't know that guy. He's like, that's Terrence Crawford. I was like, the wrestler, like the WWF guy. I was like, hey. He's like, no. He's a real boxer. You don't want to fight him. And then I walked. He came back over and like gave me a handshake or whatever. And the guy in front of me like just turned around, looked mad, looked forward the whole time. But that's very much who he is, man. He's just a guy who enjoys having a good time. And this got brought up at the photo shoot at BMO when they were doing the standoff inside on the soccer pitch. Is Eddie Hearn jokingly was like, oh, you got all this money and you're soft now. And Bud was like, hey, man, I also got kids. Like, that's, he said it tongue in cheek, but like, those are the priorities for him. He would much rather go fishing and have fun. And I'm not going to out where he goes fishing at because he'd get mad at me. But like, if he can be out catching catfish on the Platte, he would much rather be doing that than being at a bar or going to concerts or being the center of attention. That's just who he is as a person. And to kind of rope this back into a conversation we had yesterday, that's kind of the cloth that I see Dylan Raiola being cut of too. And it just seems like those two, not them only, but those two guys specifically have a craft, want to hone it in, be the best at it, and don't want to have the outside noise. And it's a lot of the reason that Terrence Crawford has been able to be as successful as he is, because he likes throwing darts. He likes playing cornhole. He enjoys fishing. He wants to be around the 15 to 20 people in his life that he trusts. And it's not a coincidence that you see somebody like Chrissy Salder or Wayne Sullivan that are in his life that do all these things that are just normal people. They're not promotional people, but he trusts them because they haven't done him wrong at this point in his life. And he can focus on just boxing because he has the people like Julie Goldsticker we saw yesterday helping his family get into the weigh-ins, and he doesn't have to worry about the outside noise. So when those things aren't being taken care of because of other things, you do see him get frustrated. And I know those videos were on social media, so I don't mind talking about it. But there was clearly frustration because of the situation that he had to deal with yesterday, because he couldn't just focus on what the task at hand was because his team around him is so good that he normally doesn't have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah, and to go back to the other piece of like he's not as big a star as he probably should be, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but I think that's by design. I think he wants to make a bunch of money. He wants his kids and his wife to be happy. He wants to take care of his mother, and he wants to eventually quit boxing and run a boxing training camp. And he will be perfectly fine with all of that. Like, they asked him about when he fought Amir Khan about fighting in Madison Square Garden, and he said, to me, it's just another fight, because he didn't care about his name being on the marquee at the world's most famous arena, because it's not a big deal to him.
Yeah, it's just about the fight game.
He's the kind of guy that you can just tell enjoys the simplest possible things in life.
Yeah.
He enjoys the process. He enjoys the process of catching a fish. He enjoys the process of trash talking when you're talking about playing darts. I mean, him and Eddie Hearn had that 301 matchup that he, by the way, crushed Eddie Hearn. And for somebody from Britain to lose to an American in darts is not a great look. But he enjoys the process of getting better at things, and it doesn't matter what it is. Like if he loses at something, and it could be as simple as like bingo, he takes it very, very personally. But it'll be interesting to see what exactly the conversation is after tonight. And Joel Diaz, the head coach, the head trainer for Israel Madrimov, had a conversation before and after the weigh-ins yesterday, and they sounded very different. We're going to tell you what that sounded like when we come back on the other side of the break here on the After Hours Lounge on 1620 The Zone special edition on a Saturday afternoon ahead of Crawford versus Madrimov here on The Zone.
It's the off-air conversations.
It's 2:31 on a Saturday afternoon here on 1620 The Zone, brought to you
We need to put together an outtakes tape.
We do. Y'all want to talk boats?
Brought to you by Pyramid Contractors. If you are affected by the storms last week or the seasonal storms, or maybe you just have questions about the damage done to your roof and siding, you can get them answered at pyramidroof.com. Book a free estimate with Kyle and the team today. We talked to you before the break about Joel Diaz, the head trainer for Israel Madrimov, and his thoughts yesterday. And he was talking before the weigh-ins with a podcast and said, we want to warn the Crawford camp. We don't want their guy to end up getting hurt, talking about the power that Israel Madrimov has. And yesterday after the weigh-ins, Joel Diaz kind of turned his tone just a little bit, and he started crediting the Crawford camp and how great of shape that Bud Crawford looked like he was in, and how it was going to be an interesting fight after that. And it's just really funny that, hey, we've seen him in the ring. We know how skilled he is. Now he looks as chic as he does and as cut as he does. And it's important to point out tonight, we talked to you about it last night, and we kind of brought it up at the opening segment that, yes, Terrence Crawford is a big, big betting favorite tonight. He's plus 900 at most sports books. But it is not uncommon for Joel Diaz to have a fighter as a massive underdog and pull off an upset. He's been in the corner for three guys who have been an underdog of minus 500 or more and pulled out a win. Obviously, the most famous, Dmitry Vabel, is the guy that just beat Canelo Alvarez's last fight, and Joel Diaz was his corner man for that fight. So we talked about the advantage of having Brian McIntyre on your side if you're Terrence Crawford. Having Joel Diaz on your side if you're Israel Madrimov is equally as important today.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the best in the world. There's no doubt about it. That guy gets it done. And for it's pretty gutsy for Madrimov to take this fight.
Yeah,
right.
But he's got everything to gain, and I think that's important.
He's got a lot
also
to
playing
lose
with house
too.
money a little bit.
I mean, yeah, it's a big payday for a guy who probably hasn't had one this big yet.
Ever, yeah.
But he just got the belt not that long ago. This is a guy who's young in his career. He's early. It would be easy for him to pass on a fight like this and take another challenger who might be a little bit easier. But you do have to give him credit for taking a fight, a younger fighter earlier in his career, just got a belt, to take a fight against the pound for pound number one, to have the courage to step in and say, yeah, I'll take on that challenge. That's a big deal.
Not to take anything away from Madrimov, because obviously he's got to get in the ring, he's got to lace up the gloves and be in there getting hit in the face by Terrence Crawford. But this is also the power of Eddie Hearn, right? He's a guy that takes some chances on some fighters. And again, we talked about it. Madrimov 300 amateur fights, but just 11 professional fights. And Eddie Hearn went out and signed him, and he's an Eddie Hearn guy. And when you have the guy that gives you your break come say, hey, we need somebody, and it's going to be a giant payday. We know you just won this belt. It's probably still really hard to say no. And we kind of alluded to it at the top of the show. Not only is this Madrimov defending his belt, but it's also the chance to get 3 other championships and the opportunity to go fight to unify all 4 belts at 154 as well. So there's a lot to be had and gained after this if you're Israel Madrimov, if you're able to beat Terrence Crawford, because now you become a superstar, right? Your name is going to be mentioned anytime we talk about some of the best.
You're the guy that took the zero.
Yeah, you're going to be, and you become. And listen, Israel Madrimov is a much better boxer, but you become Buster Douglas, right? And it's not necessarily of that magnitude, but it'd be discussed in the same realm, and because Madrimov is undefeated, so it's like it's not necessarily apples to apples in this situation, but you also have the chance to unify all 3 of the 4 belts in your weight class, and you become the automatic qualifier for Sebastian Fandora's WBA super welterweight belt as well. So it's we talk about the light at the end of the tunnel for Crawford, what's next, and Canelo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The buck isn't going to stop for Israel Madrimov if he wins tonight. Like this opens up so many more doors, and you get the chance to unify your entire weight class as you're the automatic qualifier for the next fight.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people often say that I find a bit overrated is like, oh, he's really confident coming into this fight.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course he is.
He's been training his whole life for this.
Yeah,
it'd be weird if he wasn't.
They're boxers. That's kind of the whole point.
It's their deal. It's their thing. So I don't know that you can take much away from saying like, oh, he looks real confident. The things he's saying leading up to this one lead me to believe that he really believes he can win. Well, how many fighters who are holding a belt get in the ring and don't believe they can win? Let's be real.
Don't even need the belt.
The confidence thing I think is overplayed. What's not overplayed, what we don't talk about enough, is exactly what we started this segment with, is the trainer and how they're being trained,
and
what the experience of that trainer is in getting somebody ready. for these big fights.
And we didn't even talk. We talked about, we mentioned him in the sparring and stuff, but we didn't even talk about the fact that Shakur Stevens is going to be in the corner of Bud Crawford tonight. Obviously, he's been a part of Team Crawford this entire weekend. We've seen them together multiple times this weekend as well, and it's going to be a big part of the has been a big part of the camp.
To be honest,
part of tonight.
Just as many people have asked Shakur for a picture as they have anybody on Bud's team.
Yeah, the funniest part of last night. So we walked up with Team Crawford to the weigh-ins last night, and a bunch of people obviously started noticing Shakur Stevens. He's like, "I'm not Shakur, I'm Mark." I was like, "Hey man, if you're gonna have a fake alias, you should probably know what the name's gonna be." But back to the fight, and you talked about the confidence level, and this was something that was trending on Twitter for a little bit about Madrimov, and he looked like he was, quote, shook by a lot of people. No, there's a bit of a language gap. He does speak. He does speak a little bit of English, and I think he was having a hard time understanding the questions last night.
He tried to answer in English and like wasn't quite getting it out and switched back to Russian.
And I think it had more to do with that and being uncomfortable up on stage in front of that many people. But that's a part of tonight. Like, he's going to have to be out there. Now, he doesn't have to speak until afterwards, but being in front of that many people, and we've obviously seen here that I don't think that the people at Matchroom in LA has expected the crowds in which they've seen. I mean, it was.
Well, I think that's obvious.
Yeah, it was an absolutely jam-packed event at LA Live last night. They had to stop allowing people in. There was thousands of people behind the media that were just lined up to watch this event. They had we were unfortunately not able to make it, but the Santa Monica Pier face-offs a couple days ago they said north of 500 people. So I just think there's been a little bit of a shock and awe for the amount of people that have been drawn to this event, which is surprising because they're agreeing to do this inside of a soccer stadium that's sold out. So
yeah, and like, look, we could sit here and complain about the things that we've been through this week. No need to do that, but like it does seem like it's been underestimated, the amount of attention that this was going to generate, because as you say, like, we were not able, like, we did our show until 6 p.m. local time yesterday, which is when the live weigh-in started at 6. By the time, and it's literally right across the street.
We're looking at it right now.
By the time we got done with our show, packed up, and walked across the street,
it was full.
We couldn't get in. We had to wait for other people to leave.
With media credentials.
With media credentials, we had to wait for people to leave before we could get in. We ended up getting in and getting sat down just ahead of when Bud and Israel took the stage.
Yeah, there was that many people in attendance, and they had the fire marshal literally had to shut it down because of how many people are interested. And part of me wonders how many, if they thought, okay, well, how many people are going to be here beforehand versus how many people are going to fly in on Saturday, stay for one night, and fly out. And that may have been the attempt, but this is Matchroom Boxing's first attempt at doing this big of a fight in the United States. So it has been a learning curve for them too. But to Israel Madrimov's point, this is going to be his first attempt at a fight this big anywhere as well. And you do have Joel Diaz in your corner, and he has been in this moment, and he has been in a super fight against Canelo Alvarez, and he's won. And having him to be able to talk you off the ledge and explain to you what it's going to feel like when you walk out in front of 70,000 people tonight in a sold out soccer stadium outside, helping him take away that shock and awe of, hey, this is the big stage for the first time, is going to be a huge deal.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more local interest than was anticipated. Like, we've seen a lot of people who appear to be just from the LA, the immediate area around here, that have been at all these events and have been going. Like, they wouldn't even, when the press conferences on Thursday we tried to go, we couldn't get into that at all. Yeah. Like, they wouldn't let us in.
Also packed to the gills.
It was also just jam packed. So,
and that was at the Chinese Theater, and that was a really interesting venue, because even with LA Live, you could have the thousands of people that were outside of the venue with still visual capability. At the Chinese Theater, they were just making people walk by. You couldn't stop. You couldn't stop and watch. So I mean, it's not just been yesterday. It's not just been today. It has been the entire 4-day experience here in Los Angeles that's really been kind of taken up and all encompassing by this event. And I mentioned it downstairs that Andy Hearn was behind, Eddie Hearn was behind me. Andy Hearn is my former football coach, by the way. Eddie Hearn was behind me in line, and he had mentioned that a couple people walked by wearing Nebraska gear. There's been a great representation of the color red in Nebraska here today as well, and I expect that to be tenfold tonight in the stadium.
Well, no other indication than the fight's sold out. There aren't any more tickets.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have an understanding that you're not going to get too many more of these, and to appreciate it while it's here. And obviously,
see Bud live while you can.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people have asked me this, and it's pretty apparent. You're probably never going to see him fight in Omaha again. I think that ship has sailed.
Unless it's like a retirement fight
Yeah,
on a smaller scale.
yeah, it will not be. Canelo Alvarez is not coming to Omaha,
Nope,
Nebraska.
that's not happening.
I'll tell you that. Tell you that right now. But
New York, Vegas, or Mexico City.
it has been a little bit of a conundrum here. We'll just say that
Yep.
for us to get into events. But
We've had our challenges.
I will tell you this. It has not gone well, but it has been kind of cool to see them try to encompass LA into the fight experience, doing stuff at Santa Monica. Like if
they've
it
included the community.
If it had worked, it would have been great. But the fact is that they chose some smaller venues because I just don't think they anticipated the traffic that we've seen this week. I thought you were going to say something. So.
Oh no, yeah, they haven't. They just haven't anticipated how much of a draw this fight was actually going to be.
Nebraskans travel. Spoiler alert.
Well, and the other thing is like Andy Ruiz is on this card.
Yeah,
he's from Imperial, California.
Yeah.
Which is not. It's like east of San Diego. It's a small town like on the Mexico border, but still
and probably had the biggest following at the event yesterday.
Has a ton of fans in this area, and I think honestly, like that has contributed a lot to the big draw. Like that guy, California native, who was
a big time fight for his own right, by the way.
Former heavyweight champion, winner, probably climbs the ladder for another title shot. Like,
with that being said,
he's going to be a big draw too.
With that being said, Isaac Cruz tonight, I think he will have the loudest crowd reaction of anybody.
Yeah, Pitbull Cruz. Yeah,
he in Vegas he had the largest crowd. In New York he had the largest pop, and I'm talking even with the main event being what it is. I think you're going to hear the loudest crowd reaction for him when he walks out with his traditional mariachi band and his entrance tonight. It's incredible to watch.
Is there a fight on this card, obviously other than the main event, that you are most excited to see?
Oh, it's that one. It's the Cruz fight. I mean, he's so electric, and that weight class is so much fun to watch. But I'll say this. The Ruiz fight, don't blink.
That's going to be a war.
You got two guys that are not only obviously bigger body individuals, but both feel like they have something to prove too. Dan, you got a fight you're looking forward to tonight?
Yeah, to be honest, the Pitbull Cruz fight is probably the one that I'm looking forward to. I always love when the little guys fight, and I was watching some of Cruz's tape because you guys were both talking about it yesterday. You guys were like, this guy, he's an electric factory. So I was like, all right, maybe I'll catch up on House of the Dragon later and do a couple of YouTube videos of some of these fighters. And I was watching him fight and I was like, oh, he's going to be, I was like, he's small, he's poppy. He looks cut out of granite right now. With like just is absolutely shredded. So that'll be fun. And then to be fair, I agree with Jimmy. I'm a huge Andy Ruiz fan.
Yeah.
I love when the big guys fight. It makes me feel better about not being in the heavyweight division quite yet myself.
Since we're in California, I'm going to say this a little quietly. I don't like Andy Ruiz's chances to win tonight.
The Jared Anderson Martin Bakole fight, that one has a chance to get a little bit sideways
and
too.
The winner of that fight may get the winner of Ruiz's fight tonight too. By the way, that has all the makings for that.
Jared Anderson is a large individual.
Yeah, heavyweights, big bodies.
The Bakole weighed in at what, like 303, 304, and Anderson's like 260. It was like
he's just giving up 40.
The good news about Bakole is if boxing doesn't work out for him, he can play a security guard in a movie at any point.
No kidding.
He just fits the mold. Hey, we're going to tell you how Terrence Crawford wins this fight tonight, what the strategy needs to be, what it doesn't need to be. And we'll break down a little bit more of the card, too, as the After Hours Lounge rolls on. A special Saturday show live from Los Angeles, California here on 1620 The Zone. gonna talk about the Crawford fight here in a second. We're brought to you by Pyramid Contractors. If you have a roof that's been dinged up by the hailstorm, or maybe you have been affected by the high winds last week, head over to pyramidroof.com to book a free estimate today. Before we get to the fight, I got a question.
Okay.
Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado Buffaloes quarterback, today said that he feels like Colorado is the second best team in the country behind Georgia. That's a stupid statement to make, right? Not only because they're clearly not, but like if you're gonna say that, just say you're the best team, right?
Yeah, why would you say you're the second best? That's like
that's a very weird take.
It's faux humility is what it is. He's faking being humble, and
okay.
all the while not being at all humble.
And then showing his $100,000 wristwatch.
Money.
How does Bud Crawford win this fight tonight?
I think I agree with the experts. I have no reason to doubt that Bud definitely will win this fight. I think it's going to be late. I think this goes to 8th, 9th round probably. Okay. And I think we're going to see Bud win by stoppage. I ultimately think he frustrates Madrimov, puts him in positions he doesn't want to fight from, catches him out over his feet, lunging in, trying to do that. Madrimov loves to do this, like he jumps left and comes and hops back to the right and tries to throw that big right hand. That's not going to work against Bud. Like Bud's going to see that coming a mile away
because he's going to be anticipating,
and he's going to stick a jab in your face and then hit you with something that lethal left uppercut probably. So I think it's a late stoppage in this one.
The one thing I don't want to see out of Terrence Crawford tonight is something that we've occasionally seen him do when he feels like he has something to prove. And we saw it against Felix Diaz, where Felix Diaz put on the full court pressure and was just pressing for the last 3 rounds of that fight. And Bud kind of like dropped his hands to take some shots so he could smile at him and just like kind of prove to himself that he could do it and just walk through the punches. He kind of did it a little bit with Errol Spence too in that first round, where he kind of just shook him off and just like looked at him and shook his head and then started attacking again. And that's very much who, because it's not intentional. It's not like Brian McIntyre and the crew said, "Hey, drop your hands and see if he can hit you in the face." Start again. What happened? Let's roll the dice tonight.
Yeah.
It's something that it kind of feels like that Bud has to prove to himself, and I don't want to see that tonight. There is way too much at stake for what's after this. I know they don't want to talk about it. Canelo is going to be the dirty word in the room until about midnight tonight, but they've got there's something to. There's one last big fish to catch. And you can't mortgage the house tonight to try to catch that fish later. You've got to be able. We saw him yesterday. There wasn't any smiles from him at the weigh-in. It was very much a business approach to this fight tonight. But sometimes, and even when he was about to finish Spence, you look at that 7th round, he got over his skis a little bit, and he kind of lunged for this punch, and Spence threw a really powerful hook that just missed Crawford's face. And you've seen him recuperate and kind of, okay, let me reset my feet here and stay within the pocket and not really chase the win here and just finish this off technically. If we're talking about the advantage tonight for Bud Crawford, 6-inch reach advantage. There's so much made about him moving up to 154 and being the smaller fighter. 74-inch reach for Crawford, 68-inch reach for Madrimov. Spence had a 72-inch reach. And Crawford still was able to have a massive, massive advantage in the reach and distance game. We're talking about an additional 4 inches tonight, and it could get really ugly fast. I said last night I thought this was a late round fight. After kind of dissecting both fighters, the last 3 fights, I've watched both of their last 3 fights, seeing them at the weigh-ins, looking at the reach advantage and the tail of the take, I'm going to say Crawford in 5 by stoppage. I really think that it's going to help you with the Canelo discussion to finish this decisively, because it's not the Errol Spence fight. It's not, hey, we've been chasing this guy and he is bigger and we've heard all this stuff. It's we need to continue to prove that there is no shadow of a doubt we can move up weight classes and win convincingly. And it's probably in Bud Crawford's best. I think from a technical standpoint and the way they fight, he has the ability to do it and finish him quickly with how sometimes undisciplined Madrimov is with his feet. I think he can. I think he will finish him early.
All right. Gauntlet laid down.
I mean, you know how much of an expert I am when it comes to fight sports.
Yeah.
I know all about what's going to happen tonight. I have a crystal ball. It's in my backpack. Looked into it this morning, and whoo boy, let me tell you.
What do you think your reach is, Dan? You're a gangly fella. You think you're over 74 inches?
I would have to assume so.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I'm taller than whatever that is. So
yeah,
however many inches
Bud's like 5'9"
supposed to be. So I think I have a longer. Is he?
He's 5'7".
Well, Madrimov is listed at 5'8.5",
Oh.
and Bud was taller than him.
Is this like the Kevin Durant discussion? Why are you taller than all of your teammates who are actually 7 foot?
Yeah.
And he goes, I don't know. It must be lying about their height too. But no, I think Bud's gonna probably sit back for 3 rounds, more in a defensive posture. Get in the shots where he can get in the shots, because I have a feeling that Madrimov is going to come out like a mad pit bull tonight, and he's going to try to
not
hit
gonna
as
go
hard
well
as he
if he
possibly
does.
can. Then I think round 7 stoppage.
Yeah.
Crawford.
So we're
With
all in
the
agreement.
W.
We don't think this goes the distance.
No, and with as hard as these two guys hit, and specifically if to Dan's point, if Madrimov comes out and tries jumpstarting the fight, Bud doesn't have to do anything out of the norm. He can just fight how he likes to fight, sit back and wait for that opening that Madrimov has been prone his entire career to giving you, and really just ice the fight in that situation. If Madrimov is to win, how does he win?
It's going to be one big power punch. He's gonna land that big right hand, and I would say that it's a knockout situation. I just don't see a way that he can outbox Bud. Like, if it goes to the judges' scorecards, if this does somehow go the distance, I give Madrimov like a 5% chance of winning the fight. Like, the only path to victory that I see for Israel Madrimov is to knock out Bud Crawford, which, as we obviously know, no one has ever come close to doing.
Yeah, I mean, he's only been knocked down twice in his career. One was, you could debate, was a slip, and I'll listen to you. But yeah, for me, he's just got to have the puncher's chance. And you brought up the decision portion of this. For me, I think if no matter what happens, if it does come down to a decision, and I know people don't want to hear this, they often favor the bigger name, even if they're not the champion.
Yeah.
So if it does go to decision, I don't think that's going to be great for the Madrimov team as well. It has been great to be with you here on a Saturday night, 2:56 in Omaha, 12:56 in LA. We're getting ready to head over to BMO Stadium. Enjoy the Crawford versus Madrimov fight tonight. You can catch it on ESPN Plus. We got to give a big time thank you to Julie Goldsticker, Team Crawford, and the folks at Matchroom Boxing for helping put this on tonight. For Dan Campinen, John Schreiner, I've been Jimmy Allen. Enjoy the fight tonight. Hopefully we're talking to you on Tuesday about a big win for Team Crawford live from LA. It's been the After Hours Lounge. We'll see you on Tuesday.